Good morning, class. Glad to meet again this morning. Okay, before we start the class, can someone volunteer to pray? Thank you for the prayer. Now, look at the screen. The hands are tied. According to you, try to think of how you let go of the rope in the hand. Think. Beside the picture, this is a scissor. Whether you will use scissor or in your way. Use a scissor or open with your hand the binding knot. Thank you for the two ideas that you said. The first, using a scissor is a way to quickly release the hand from the bond. Second, opening the cover of the wraparound case can detach the hand without sacrificing the rope itself. Does anyone still remember our last material last week? Yes, indeed. Introduction to philosophy. To test wherever you still remember the past, I want to give a question. When did the philosophy of education begin? Thank you for having attention to the material. All right. Let's get into our current learning goals. After the lesson, student will be able to first distinguish Platonic idealism from religious idealism. Second, summarize idealism as a philosophy. And the third, reflect on Adventist education based on idealism. Okay, first learning goal, distinguish Platonic idealism and religious idealism. Let us see the video from YouTube to add our material
Athens,
about
2,400 years ago. It's a compact place. Only about 250,000 people live here. There are fine baths, theatres, temples, shopping arcades and gymnasiums. It's warm for more than half the year. This is also home to the world's first true and probably greatest philosopher, Plato. Born into a prominent and wealthy family in the city, Plato devoted his life to one goal, helping people to reach a state of what he termed eudaimonia, or fulfillment. Plato is often confused with Socrates. Socrates was an older friend who taught Plato a lot but didn't write any books. Plato wrote lots of them, 36, all dialogues, beautifully crafted scripts of imaginary discussions in which Socrates is always allotted a starring role, among them the Republic, the Symposium, the Laws, the Meno, and the Apology. Plato had 4 big ideas for making life more fulfilled. First big idea, think more. We rarely give ourselves time to think carefully and logically about our lives and how to lead them. Sometimes we just go along with what the Greeks called doxa, or popular opinions. In the 36 books he wrote, Plato showed this common sense to be riddled with errors, prejudice, and superstition. Fame is great, follow your heart, money is the key to a good life. The problem is, popular opinions edge us towards the wrong values, careers, and relationships. Plato's answer is, know yourself. It means doing a special kind of therapy, philosophy, subjecting your ideas to examination rather than acting on impulse. If you strengthen your self-knowledge, you don't get so pulled around by feelings. Plato compared the role of our feelings to being dragged dangerously along by a group of wild horses. In honor of his mentor and friend Socrates, this kind of examination is called a Socratic discussion. You can have it with yourself, or ideally with another person who isn't trying to catch you out, but wants to help you clarify your own ideas. Second big idea, let your lover change you. That sounds weird if you think that love means finding someone who wants you just the way you are. In a symposium, Plato's play about a dinner party where a group of friends drink too much and get talking about love, sex, and relationships, Plato says, true love is admiration. In other words, the person you need to get together with should have very good qualities, which you yourself lack. Let's say they should be really brave or organized or warm and sincere. By getting close to this person, you can become a little like they are. The right person for us helps us grow to our full potential. For Plato, in a good relationship, a couple shouldn't love each other exactly as they are right now. They should be committed to educating each other and to enduring the stormy passages this inevitably involves. Each person should want to seduce the other into becoming a better version of themselves. 3. Decode the message of beauty. Everyone pretty much likes beautiful things, but Plato was the first to ask, why do we like them? He found a fascinating reason. Beautiful objects are whispering important truths to us about the good life. We find things beautiful when we unconsciously sense in them qualities we need but are missing in our lives. Gentleness, harmony, balance, peace, strength. Beautiful objects, therefore, have a really important function. They help to educate our souls. Ugliness is a serious matter too. It parades dangerous and damaged characteristics in front of us. It makes it harder to be wise, kind, and calm. Plato sees art as therapeutic. It's the duty of poets and painters, and nowadays novelists, TV producers, and designers to help us to live good lives. 4. Reform society. Plato spent a lot of time thinking how the government and society should ideally be. He was the world's first utopian thinker. In this, he was inspired by Athens' great rival, Sparta. This was a city-sized machine for turning out great soldiers. Everything the Spartans did, how they raised their children, how their economy was organized, whom they admired, how they had sex, what they ate, was tailored to that one goal. And Sparta was hugely successful from a military point of view. But that wasn't Plato's concern. He wanted to know, how could a society get better at producing not military power, but fulfilled people? In his book, The Republic, Plato identifies a number of changes that should be made. Athenian society was very focused on the rich, like the louche aristocrat Alcibiades, and sports celebrities like the boxer Milo of Croton. Plato wasn't impressed. It really matters who we admire, because celebrities influence our outlook, ideas, and conduct, and bad heroes give glamour to flaws of character. Plato therefore wanted to give Athens new celebrities, replacing the current crop with ideally wise and good people he called guardians, models for everyone's good development. These people would be distinguished by their record of public service, their modesty and simple habits, their dislike of the limelight, and their wide and deep experience. They would be the most honoured and admired people in society. He also wanted to end democracy in Athens. He wasn't crazy. He just observed how few people think properly before they vote, and therefore we get very substandard rulers. He didn't want to replace democracy with a horrid dictatorship, but he wanted to prevent people from voting until they'd started to think rationally. That is, until they'd become philosophers. Otherwise, government would just be a kind of mob rule. To help the process, Plato started a school, the Academy, in Athens, which lasted a good 300 years. There, pupils learned not just maths and spelling, but also how to be good and kind. His ultimate goal was that politicians should become philosophers. The world will not be right, he said, until kings become philosophers or philosophers kings.
Okay, we will continue our activity to be class discussion. Before continue our lesson, we will discuss. I divided 4 groups. Group 1 in front of the left, and group 2 in front of the right. Group 3 in the left behind, and group 4 in the right behind. Can do that? Thank you. We are finished with the discussion. Now, let's look at the material. Platonic idealism is center of the search is the truth, because the truth is perfect and eternal. The word of the ideas of form has goodness as its highest point. The material world, the constantly changing world of sensory data, cannot be trusted. People need as much as possible to free themselves from material problems so they can progress toward the good. This can be done by transcending material through the use of dialectics or critical discussion, where one moves from mere opinion to true knowledge. Okay, let's follow again the video that I take from YouTube. The video will support about our learning objective.
The Greek philosopher Plato was a student of Socrates and teacher of Aristotle. He wrote on a wide variety of topics, including politics, aesthetics, cosmology, and epistemology. To this day, we refer to Platonic love and Platonic ideals. Plato's search for knowledge and truth formed the basis of much of Western philosophy. Plato's birth date is disputed. Some sources say around 428 BC, others claim 424 BC. In any case, it was a fortunate birth. Plato's parents were both descended from Athenian nobility. Like other children from distinguished families in Athens, Plato received the best education of the day, studying philosophy, poetry, and gymnastics. Plato grew up during the Peloponnesian War, and as a young man saw the political chaos surrounding the final defeat of Athens by Sparta. 2 of Plato's relatives came to power in the new government, who were known as the 30 Tyrants, and were notorious for denying Athenians their rights. The group ruled briefly until this despised oligarchy was overthrown and Athens returned to democracy in 403 BC. You might expect, given Plato's prominent family connections, that he was destined to be a politician. Plato's life took a different path, however, when he met the great teacher Socrates and was inspired by his philosophy of the pursuit of knowledge and virtue. It's ironic considering that Socrates was accused of corrupting the youth of Athens, including Plato. Socrates was unpopular with the 30 tyrants as well as with the leaders of the newly restored democracy. In a grave miscarriage of justice, Socrates was found guilty of the trumped-up offenses and was sentenced to death. Plato tried to prevent his execution, offering to pay a fine to spare Socrates' life. However, Socrates willingly went to his death. Plato was forever afterwards disgusted by politics and dedicated his life to the study of philosophy, like his teacher. Although Plato was famously taught by Socrates, he was also influenced by Pythagoras and others. After Socrates' death, Plato left Athens and traveled for 12 years, studying various subjects including mathematics with the Pythagoreans in Italy and geometry and astronomy in Egypt. During these travels, Plato wrote his early dialogues, which featured Socrates and his teachings. Since Socrates did not write any books of his own, these dialogues represent one of the very few pictures of the legendary philosopher and his style of discourse. Returning to Athens, Plato founded the Academy around 387 BC. The Academy is thought to be the first Western institution of higher learning. Here, one could attend open-air lectures in astronomy, biology, mathematics, politics, and philosophy. The Socratic method was commonly used as a form of rational discussion, whereby a given hypothesis is examined by questioning. If these questions lead logically to a contradiction, a new candidate for truth must be adopted. Generations were educated at the Academy until it was destroyed in 86 BC, when Athens was conquered by the Romans during the First Mithridatic War. The Academy was revived in the early 5th century by Neoplatonists, who saw themselves as successors to Plato. In 529, Emperor Justinian I of Byzantium closed the Academy once and for all. He saw it as a threat to Christianity. While Plato taught at the Academy, he continued to write. He amassed 35 dialogues and 13 letters, known as epistles, though the authenticity of some of these works has been called into question. Although he was reluctant to write about himself, several of Plato's family members appear in these works. Most historians consider this a sign of Plato's pride in his distinguished family. The order in which Plato's works were written is not known for certain, although some rough grouping is traditionally done by historians as follows. The earliest dialogues, including the Apology and Crito, presented the teachings of Socrates. Later dialogues, such as the Republic and the Symposium, introduced Plato's theory of forms and the relationship between the soul, the state, and the cosmos. Finally, his most mature works are grouped together because they are considered stylistically similar. These include the Laws and Timaeus and address such topics as law, mathematics, and natural science. The theory of forms is at the heart of Platonism. In Plato's view, reality is unavailable to those who completely rely on their senses. He explained that every object that we could see or interact with in our experience of reality was actually just a mimic of a form, capital F. For instance, we recognize a brick when we see it, even though every brick is a little bit different, because they are all reflections of some essential, true brick that is the real, ideal brick. Plato argued that these forms and other abstract ideas were more real than those things we could see and hear and touch. Universals such as justice, beauty, and equality are not accessible to the senses, but are understood only through reason. Plato's view of the condition of humankind is perhaps best captured in his allegory of the cave, as written in the Republic. The words of this parable are spoken by Socrates and Plato's brother, Glaucon, but it is considered to be Plato's own ideology. Socrates describes to Glaucon a group of prisoners, chained for their entire lives in a cave, shackled in such a way that they can only look in front of them at one of the walls of the cave. Behind them is a fire burning brightly. In between the fire and the prisoners is a platform where objects are exhibited. The prisoners cannot see the reality of these objects, only the shadows they cast on the wall of the cave. If we rely solely on our senses, we are like the prisoners in the cave, who cannot sense the reality behind them, only the poor copies of the real world projected before them. The real world of ideals can only be perceived by reason, hence the vital importance of the Academy. Plato spent his last years writing and teaching at the Academy. Undoubtedly, we cannot know all of what Plato thought, especially since he preferred speaking to writing as a means of transmitting knowledge. According to the writings of his students, Plato had a set of unwritten doctrines which were taught only orally. Plato's most famous student, Aristotle, came to study at the Academy in 367 BC and remained there for the next 20 years. He would go on to found his own academy, called the Lyceum, where he would carry on the great tradition of Plato and Socrates. Plato died around 348 BC and is believed to be buried on the grounds of the Academy.
Okay, I hope that two video to make clear about background of Plato and Platonic, because the ideas of Socrates and Plato are considered almost indistinguishable today. Scholars generally refer to this writing as Platonic philosophy. Two of his most famous works are the Republic and Laws. People should concern themselves primarily with the search of truth, the source of the true knowledge. According to the Plato, ourselves are living in the cave of shadow and illusion, changed by our ignorance and apathy. When we begin to loosen ourselves from our chains, it is the beginning of our education. The step concept represents the dialectic that will carry us from the world of matter to the world of ideas. Truth is perfect and eternal. It cannot be found in the world of matter. In the Republic, Plato wrote about the separation of the world of ideas from the source of all true knowledge. The world of matter, the ever-changing world of sensory data, it is not to be trusted. People need as much as possible to free themselves from a concern with matter so that they can advance toward the good. This can be done by transcending matter through the use the dialectic or critical decision, in which one moves from mere opinion to true knowledge. Plato said, the search for absolute truth should be the guest of the true philosopher. The value of Plato's idea is that they have stimulated thinking about the meaning of purpose of humanity, society, and education, and have even entered into modern truth and practice in many subtle ways. Idealism has had a profound influence on religion. The figure of religious idealism is Augustine. Augustine connected Platonic philosophy with Christian belief. Judaism and Christianity include many beliefs that are compatible with idealistic thinking. In Judaism and Christianity, the idea of one God as a pure spirit and universal good can easily be recognized as compatible with this philosophy. Okay, to support our material today, let's see again the video that I add from YouTube.
Augustine was a Christian philosopher who lived in the 4th and 5th century AD on the fringes of the rapidly declining Roman Empire in the North African town of Hippo. He served as bishop for 35 years, proving popular and inspirational to his largely uneducated and poor congregation. In his last days, a Germanic tribe known as the Vandals burnt Hippo to the ground, destroyed the legions, made off with the town's young women, but left Augustine's cathedral and library entirely untouched out of respect for the elderly philosopher's achievements. He matters to us non-Christians today because of what he criticized about Rome, its values and its outlook, and because Rome has so many things in common with the modern West, especially the United States. The Romans believed in two things in particular. 1. Earthly happiness. They were, on the whole, an optimistic lot. The builders of the Pont du Gard and the Colosseum had faith in technology, in the power of humans to master themselves, and in their ability to control nature and plot for their own happiness and satisfaction. Writers like Cicero and Plutarch had a degree of pride, ambition, and confidence in the future, which, with some revisions, wouldn't be out of place in modern-day Palo Alto or the pages of Wired. The Romans were keen practitioners of what we would nowadays call self-help, training their audiences to greater success and effectiveness. In their eyes, the human animal was something eminently open to being perfected. 2. A just social order. For long periods, the Romans trusted that their society was marked by justice, justitia. People of ambition and intelligence could make it to the top. The army was trusted to be meritocratic. The capacity to make money was held to reflect both practical ability and also a degree of inner virtue. Therefore, showing off one's wealth was deemed honourable and a point of pride, and fame was considered a wholly respectable ideal. Augustine disagreed furiously with both of these assumptions. In his masterpiece, The City of God, he dissected each of these 2 points, that human life could be perfected and the societies were just, in ways that continue to prove relevant to us today. It was Augustine who came up with the idea of original sin. He proposed that all humans, not merely this or that unfortunate example, were crooked because all of us are unwitting heirs to the sins of Adam. Our sinful nature gives rise to what Augustine called a libido dominandi, a desire to dominate, which is evident in the brutal, blinkered, merciless way we treat others and the world around us. We cannot properly love, for we are constantly undermined by our egoism and our pride. Our powers of reasoning and understanding are fragile in the extreme. Lust haunts our days and nights. We fail to understand ourselves. We chase phantoms. We're beset by anxieties. Augustine concluded his assault by chiding all those philosophers who, in his words, have wished with amazing folly to be happy here on earth and to achieve bliss by their own efforts. It might sound depressing, but it may turn out to be a curious relief to be told that our lives are awry, not by coincidence, but by definition, simply because we're human, and because nothing human can ever be made entirely straight. We are creatures fated to intuit virtue and love, while never quite being able to secure them for ourselves. Our relationships, careers, and countries are necessarily not as we'd want them to be. It isn't anything specific we have done. The odds are simply stacked against us from the start. Augustinian pessimism takes off some of the pressure we might feel when we slowly come to terms with the imperfect nature of pretty much everything we do and are. We shouldn't rage or feel that we've been persecuted or singled out for undue punishment. It's simply the human condition, the legacy of what we might as well, even if we don't believe in Augustine's theology, call original sin. Romans had, in their most ambitious moments, thought themselves to be running a meritocracy, a society where those who got to the top were deemed to have done so on the back of their own virtues. After the Emperor Constantine's conversion to Christianity, the philosopher Eusebius even proposed that earthly power was God's instrument for establishing Christianity on earth, so that the powerful in Rome were now not just privileged, but also blessed and righteous in God's eyes. What arrogant, boastful, and cruel claims, responded Augustine. There never was nor ever could be justice in Rome, or indeed anywhere else on earth. God didn't give good people wealth and power, and nor did he necessarily condemn those who lacked them. Augustine distinguished between what he called two cities, the city of men and the city of God. The latter was an ideal of the future, a heavenly paradise where the good would finally dominate, where power would be properly allied to justice, and where virtue would reign. But men could never build such a city alone, and should never believe themselves capable of doing so. They were condemned to dwell only in the city of men, which was a pervasively flawed society, where money could never accurately track virtue. In Augustine's formulation, true justice has no existence save in that republic whose founder and ruler is Christ. Again, it may sound bleak, but it makes Augustine's philosophy extremely generous towards failure, poverty, and defeat, our own and that of others. It's not for humans to judge each other by outward markers of success. From this analysis flows a lack of moralism and snobbery. It's our duty to be skeptical about power and generous towards failure. We don't need to be Christians to be comforted by both these points. They are the religion's universal gifts to political philosophy and human psychology. They stand as permanent reminders of some of the dangers and cruelties of believing that life can be made perfect, or that poverty and obscurity are reliable indicators of vice in a city of men.
Okay, thank you for the video. Idealism, the sense we're unreliable and that belief in God rests ultimately on faith. We must first believe, we wrote, in order that we know. By Plato, the soul are knowledge that is obscure by being imprisoned in the body. According to Augustine, the soul was blinded by Adam's fall from grace, which resulted in human doubt and uncertainty. Augustine, like Plato, believed that people do not create a knowledge. God already has created it, and people can discover it through trying to find God. Someone cannot teach another in the traditional sense, but can direct the learner with words or other symbol or sign. Learning must come from within, and all true knowledge ultimately comes from God. It's not surprising that idealism and religion have been closely intertwined. Christianity in particular promotes the ideas of God as transcendent, as pure spirit or idea. In addition to this is the Christian concept that God created the world out of himself, or out of spirit or idea. Let's follow the video that I took from YouTube that support the second learning objective.
What is idealism? Idealism is a philosophical doctrine which holds the view that ideas are the only reality. Hence, for the idealists, there is no external reality and that the world is consist of ideas. For this reason, the idealists argue that material things do not really exist. In fact, for the idealists, material things are not real because they are mutable and destructible. This is because whatever that is mutable and destructible keeps on changing, and whatever that keeps on changing cannot be considered real. Only ideas, therefore, are real for the idealists, because ideas do not change. They are immutable and indestructible. Idealism is normally contrasted with realism, a philosophical doctrine which holds the view that material objects are independent of the human mind. Thus, they exist on their own. For the realists, therefore, material objects are real. Now, contrary to the contention of the realists, the idealists associate reality with the mind rather than with material things. Hence, the mind, for the idealists, is the essence of reality, and that ideas are the only permanent reality. The ancient Greek philosopher Plato was the well-known figure in idealism. As is well known, Plato believed that the physical world is not real. And as we can see, because the physical world constantly changes, one cannot really tell what it really is. In his seminal work titled The Republic, Plato introduced two kinds of world, namely the world of forms or ideas and the world of matter. Now, according to Plato, any material object that exists in the world of matter is just a copy of the object that exists in the world of forms. Take, for example, a tree. For Plato, the tree that we experience in the world of matter is not real because it is mutable, destructible, and changeable. The real tree is the one that exists in the world of form. That is, the tree that exists on the level of idea. Indeed, our conception of any material objects, for example a tree, is the form of those material objects. In other words, the idea of a tree is for Plato the form of that tree. And for Plato, that is the real tree.
Okay, thank you for watching the video. Because COVID-19, we will discuss by Google Meet. Find your partner, discuss the pros and cons of idealism as an educational philosophy. Know your answer and your friend, and produce them. We will discuss on Google Meet and share your final thoughts. Okay, please. The concept of idealism about the idea that all true knowledge comes from God. That God created this world from Himself. Adventist education glorifies God, the great teacher, as the creator of the universe, and from Him is all science. Now, we will discuss again. I will divide our discussion into two groups. We will discuss comparison between Adventist education and idealism. Okay? Let this mind be in you, which was also in Jesus Christ. As a Christian, we must mind Jesus. But the natural man receive not the things of the Spirit of God, for they are foolishness unto him. Neither can he know them, because they are spiritual discerned, but he that is spiritual judges all things. Yet he himself is judged by no man. For who has known the mind of the Lord, that he may instruct him? But we have received the mind of Christ. Okay, our material this day is done. Before close our class, please pay attention for the next class. Our material for the next class about realism and education, implication of the philosophy to the aims of education, teaching methodology, and various curricular matters. Please read it for next meeting. Okay, to close our class, let's pray. Dear Father in heaven, thank you for guiding us. Please, Lord, bless each one of us. Thank you for hearing our prayer. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.